Just to explain the project, I mean, we know people in town who've had some experiences that, I mean, mainly musicians, but also a couple of writers and whatever, just a sort of general collage of comments on their experience of the 60s, which people seem to remember as a sort of very special and interesting decade socially. I mean, a lot of people remember it sort of, flower power, but it's also, social change, civil rights. I'm talking more about the more sort of psychedelic aspect of it later on. I mean, just your particular memories. Did it strike you as a particularly special, interesting decade? I mean, just how your memories of it.
Yes, because of all of the musical activity that was happening at that time, jazz-wise, rock-wise, and it reflected the social environment. Remember, Vietnam was happening. There was a lot of activity. I remember people just writing music, protesting, writing, lyrics, and it's nothing like it is now. You had so many incredible artists just working from scratch. This is not about recycling old material and looping it. People were from scratch writing material. It's almost like it's not as heavy as years before, hundreds of years almost before. Can you imagine when a person like Mozart would write a full symphony as like a letter, just it all just came out for 110 pieces in the score, and just put it off to the side or mail it off to someone. Said, this is what I was thinking, of how to approach a specific concept. And it would be a 40-minute piece or a 50-minute piece for 100 pieces, the magic flute or something, with libretto, the whole bit, everything as if it were, and post it, and send it off in horse and carriage to somebody down the road, and to fast forward to people like that were doing that in the 60s and in early 70s. It's like they were doing fundamentally the same thing. They were really thinking. The mind, the computer was going in another way. Then, all of a sudden, things started changing where instead of writing or looking to write music in that way or connect in that way, even through a musical instrument, writers, people who were developing and composing, started to compose via electronics, where they would just take sampling devices, put their finger on a keyboard without knowing what note they were actually playing, but because that frequency connected via MIDI to an electronic instrument where they could alter that frequency, it didn't matter to them what frequency, 440, 220, it didn't matter. It was like just about how it shaped. And then they would speak over it. And they would call it what's it, drum and bass or something like this. It was like, and that's all that they wanted. That was their rhythm. And then on top of that would come these effects. So that went through a whole period. And then all of a sudden the protests started in another way. Just, I hate my life, I hate my environment, I want to kill this person and blah, 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 blah. All through poetry with monotone. Blah 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 blah. And it would reflect it is reflected not just the words, but visually in the individuals. They don't like themselves. They're fat, obese generally, and that was for a while the modus operandi, when they wearing extremely oversized clothing, pants that don't fit, falling down. It was a statement, a social statement against. And this is, again, human nature, And you see it in all these forms. And the music is this way, yeah.
Were the 60s fun?
They were educational for me. That's all. It was like school, Army. And then at the end, work. 68 to the present, we've been hitting it.
Just very finally, as I mentioned before, a comment on your experience of seeing a blind
Mm-hmm.
cricket match. We just talk about that.
To see cricket played by blind people tells me that, in essence, you know, if you have an imagination, anything can be done. People are thinking about wormholes as a means of traveling between planets. More than likely, it's already happened. If you're thinking it, then more than likely it's happened. You know, everything starts with a dream, and if you can have a league where no one can see but can hear, and can focus on a specific object by sonic, you know, why not? Why not?
Where did you see this game? Was it at Lord's? Was that right?
At Lord's Cricket Grounds, yeah, north of London, yeah. It was amazing.